Hey, welcome to the Cheap Air Gunner channel. It's Cherokee Steve. I've got some bad news as far as I'm concerned in regards to the replacement breech that I had ordered and received for the KT HPA. Another one in the POM plastic. I got it mounted. I got it cut so it wouldn't sit on any variations in height areas of the top of the assembly, which is one of the problems I had before. It's the reason why I ground some clearance on the original one. But I believed it was that thinned out material that helped contribute to it breaking and cracking. So after cutting it back, I figured I was all in. I drilled and tapped for a second barrel grub screw. I attached it, and the first shot that I took over my crony, number one, it seemed like there was a significant amount of air blowing out from somewhere as the trigger was pulled, and unfortunately not going into the barrel. The velocity on the chronograph proved that out. It was in the mid 600s. Now, if you remember in earlier testing, when I originally had the whole thing together and everything was fine, it was shooting easily over 800 feet per second. As a matter of fact, I was getting, depending on the pellet I used, over 20 foot-pounds of energy. Well, that first shot that I took with this, the area in the breech where that little breech screw goes, the one that is underneath the bolt, right there, it cracked out material. I'm going to try to get this on camera and in focus, but this is it's the head of the little breech screw, and this is how the material would sit. It's a perfectly cracked out round section of plastic. One of the things that I noticed that I don't particularly care for, that I think contributes quite a bit to this happening, number one, it's, you know, a relatively thin amount of material that the head of the screw makes contact with. The other thing that I've noticed is that the head of the screw is angled, tapered, beveled. So it goes up like that. This is how thin the cracked out material is from the breech, and it is not molded with any type of bevel to it. The screw's beveled head goes down onto a flat surface. Now, that really minimizes the contact area that the head of that screw has with this material. It makes for a very extremely thin ridge of contact area between that beveled head and a straight contact surface. I would think there's plenty of depth to the recess of where that screw goes, where it could be and should be, in my opinion, molded with a bevel that matches the angle on the head of the screw. It's not. It's just flat. So that makes for a very sharp contact between area of the breech and the head of the screw. The combination, in my opinion, of the breech being made out of the material that it's made out of and it being designed the way that it's designed, it's not really conducive to a high pressure air situation. I believe what's happening with the extremely high volume of air that's being forced very quickly into the barrel port. Obviously the goal is to have the back of the barrel sealed off with the O-ring that's on the bolt probe, and having that air being sandwiched into that little area between that O-ring and the back of the pellet. This fills up with that high pressure air, and the only place for it to go, hopefully, is towards the front of the barrel and pushing the pellet along with it as it goes out of the barrel. In this particular case, I believe that very fraction of a second amount of time that high pressure of air is forced into that little area is creating too much force prior to the pellet being able to actually get going down the barrel. It's actually lifting the breech up very quickly. It was on the first shot. I could tell, I could feel not only air, but something solid hit my hand. And it was this little broken off piece from the bottom of the breech that breech screw goes through. So, long story short, the first thing I did with the breech, in order for it to work, which had to have been done because of poor designing, was cut it back so that it wasn't sitting crooked on raised areas. Design flaw number one, which has been established in previous videos, is this surface. The breech is made to go from back here all the way up to here. But this surface is higher than this surface, and this surface is higher than this tube. So something has to be done. And the first thing I tried was grinding clearance for this. Number one, cut it back so it didn't sit on here at all. Cut it back to here and grind some clearance in the bottom of the breech so that it was just starting to make contact with both of these surfaces simultaneously. But I believe that contributed to that first breech cracking. So to leave the breech bottom as thick as possible and yet not be sitting on a raised surface crooked, I cut it short enough so it wasn't even sitting on, it was only going to sit on the main hammer tube. So that was the first thing I did when I got it. So it's not worth, I'm not even going to try to call the manufacturer and let them know that I would like a new breech, because I had already modified this one before even installing it. You know, I'm familiar with the process. They're going to ask me to send it back. After receiving it, they'll send me a new one, and I don't think it's worth getting a new one, and I don't think there's any chance of me getting my money back, because it was already cut back to a shorter length before it was even installed. Communicating all that with somebody in China, with what's lost in translation, it's just not worth it. It's a lesson learned. So, 2 plastic breeches have been gone through. The first one lasted a month or 2. I can't remember the exact time frame. The second one didn't even make it through 1 shot. So, I'm definitely convinced that this particular type of breech is not the way to go. Now, there is another breech that is offered by the HPA kit seller, and that is a brass breech. So that is my next step in this process, is to obtain a brass breech, and I will have to go about modifying that so it works with the different heights of different parts of the HPA assembly. So that's where I'm at. It's not usable. I'm still waiting on the 24-inch barrel. It's supposedly shipped out May 1st. Where it's at, I don't know, but I don't have it. So still waiting on the 24-inch barrel. I had just placed an order for that brass breech. It seems like 2 weeks is the norm, at least for me receiving both of these plastic breeches. It took 2 weeks to arrive from China, which is pretty decent, but that's 2 more weeks at least that I'm going to have to wait, and then see what I could do with this whole process. I am determined to get this thing working. So it's about $60 down the drain, $64, $65 combined for the 2 plastic breeches down the drain. The brass breech is a little bit more expensive. It's $40. So this is upwards of $100 invested in just breeches, trying to get this thing to work and have some longevity to it. So that's where I'm at with the HPA kit. Guys, thanks for watching the video. Sorry it doesn't include any type of shooting, just some explaining, but I did want to update on where I'm at with the HPA kit. You guys stay safe and shoot safe.